The night vision goggles gave everything an ethereal green glow as Marcus Reed moved silently through the dense Afghan mountains. 15 years as a Navy SEAL had taught him how to become a ghost, even in terrain that would make mountain goats nervous. His team was spread out behind him, maintaining radio silence as they approached their target, a suspected weapons cache hidden deep in a cave system. The mission was straightforward: confirm the intel and plant tracking devices. But as Marcus crested the ridge, something caught his attention. The air felt wrong, charged with an energy that made his skin prickle beneath his tactical gear. His training screamed at him that something was off, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for what happened next. The stars above him began to blur, as if someone had taken an eraser to the night sky. The air crackled with electromagnetic energy, strong enough to make his night vision equipment malfunction in a burst of static. Marcus ripped off his goggles just as a light, brighter than any flare he'd ever seen, erupted overhead. His radio crackled to life with the voices of his teammates, but before he could respond, the light engulfed him. The sensation wasn't painful, it felt more like being submerged in carbonated water while riding in an elevator that moved in impossible directions. When his vision cleared, Marcus found himself in a sterile chamber that looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. The walls pulsed with an iridescent blue light, and the air carried a strange metallic taste. Marcus immediately dropped into a defensive stance, his training kicking in despite the bizarre situation. That's when he saw them, the Vilaxians. They moved with an unsettling grace on their multiple appendages, their bodies covered in what looked like living metal that shifted colors as they moved. Specimen acquired, one of them announced in perfect English, though its mouth, if you could call it that, didn't move. Human male, physical condition optimal, neural patterns indicating advanced training. Marcus assessed his situation with the cold calculation that had kept him alive through countless missions. No weapons, no comm gear, no backup. But he still had his most important assets, his training and his mind. You know, he said, keeping his voice steady and casual, there are easier ways to get someone's attention. Could have just sent an email. The Vilaxian's metallic skin rippled in what might have been surprise. The specimen demonstrates unexpected cognitive functions, another one noted. Previous data suggested humans would respond with panic or aggression. Sorry to disappoint, Marcus replied, slowly turning to take in more of his surroundings. We're full of surprises. The chamber suddenly hummed to life, and holographic displays materialized around him. Marcus watched as his entire biological makeup was displayed in three-dimensional detail, along with what appeared to be psychological profiles and behavioral predictions. Subject demonstrates unusual calm, a third Vilaxian observed. Recommended for advanced testing protocols. Marcus didn't like the sound of that, but he maintained his composed exterior. He'd been through SEER training, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. While this situation was unprecedented, the principles remained the same: stay alert, gather intelligence, and look for opportunities. The Vilaxians continued their analysis, seemingly fascinated by his vital signs and brainwave patterns. They spoke among themselves in their native language, a series of metallic clicks and harmonic tones that made Marcus's teeth vibrate. Your species presents an anomaly, the first Vilaxian finally addressed him directly. Physical capabilities minimal, technological advancement limited, yet you display adaptation rates that defy our models. You will help us understand this inconsistency. And if I decline your generous research opportunity? Marcus asked, already knowing the answer. Participation is not optional, the alien replied, its metallic skin shifting to a deeper shade of blue. You are now part of the Vilaxian Understanding Initiative. Your performance will determine the fate of your species. The chamber began to fill with a fine mist, and Marcus felt his consciousness starting to fade. As darkness crept in at the edges of his vision, he focused on memorizing every detail he could: the layout of the room, the movements of the Vilaxians, the operation of their technology. If they wanted to test him, fine. But they'd soon learn that humans had a habit of turning tests into opportunities. His last conscious thought was of his team back on Earth. They'd be searching for him, but they'd never find him. Whatever was coming, he was on his own. But then again, that's when humans were often at their most dangerous, when backed into a corner with everything to lose. As Marcus slipped into unconsciousness, the Vilaxians had no way of knowing they'd just made a crucial mistake. They'd selected him because he was a perfect physical specimen, a trained warrior. But they failed to understand that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its strength or its technology, it was its unconquerable spirit and its ability to adapt, overcome, and turn the tables on anyone who made the mistake of underestimating them. When Marcus regained consciousness, he found himself in what appeared to be a holding cell, though cell was perhaps too primitive a word for it. The space was a perfect hexagon, its walls composed of the same shifting, metallic material he'd seen on the Vilaxians' bodies. Through one translucent wall, he could see other similar cells, each containing beings that defied description. In the cell directly across from his, a creature that seemed to be made entirely of crystalline structures pulsed with internal light. Next to it, something that looked like a cross between a mantis and a panther paced restlessly. Each prisoner represented a different evolutionary path, a different world's answer to survival. "The new one is awake," a voice echoed in his mind. Marcus turned to see the crystalline being focusing its faceted surface in his direction. "I am ZYX. Welcome to the Crucible." Before Marcus could respond, the cell walls became transparent, and a Vilaxian voice filled the chamber. "Begin Adaptation Trial 1. Multiple Species Interaction Assessment." The walls between cells disappeared, and Marcus found himself in a vast arena with the other prisoners. The space was at least the size of a football field, with various terrain features, pools of liquid, rocky outcroppings, and metallic structures that seemed to serve no obvious purpose. "They want to see how we interact," ZYX's thoughts reached him again. "Whether we fight or cooperate. It's always the first test." Marcus nodded, keeping his stance neutral but ready. "And what usually happens?" "Usually. Chaos. Fear. Violence." The crystalline being shifted, creating a sound like wind chimes. "But you're different. Your mind pattern, it's ordered, disciplined." The mantis panther creature had moved closer, its compound eyes studying Marcus with predatory intensity. Other beings were emerging from their cells, some floating, some crawling, some moving in ways that didn't seem possible under normal physics. "I am Karn," the mantis panther announced in a clicking voice that somehow formed Earth English. "My world was a warrior culture. I recognize the way you carry yourself, human. You are a warrior too." Marcus assessed the situation, falling back on his special operations training. In any uncertain environment, information and allies were more valuable than weapons. Marcus Reed. "And yes, I'm a warrior. But right now, I think we all have a common enemy." A high-pitched screech drew their attention. One of the floating creatures had attacked another prisoner, leading to a cascade of violence as fear and confusion took hold. But Marcus noticed something: the Vilaxians weren't just watching the chaos. They were taking readings, measuring responses, studying patterns. "This isn't just a test of interaction," he realized aloud. "They're gathering combat data. Studying how different species fight, adapt, and survive." ZYX's crystalline surface rippled. "Yes. The Vilaxians believe that understanding comes through conflict. They think truth emerges in moments of survival." Marcus watched as the violence spread, but he remained still, analyzing. The arena's features weren't random, they were tools, opportunities. The metallic structures could provide cover or elevation. The pools might offer advantages to amphibious species. Everything was deliberate. "We're giving them exactly what they want," he said. "They expect us to act like primitive beings, fighting over territory and dominance. But what if we showed them something different?" Karn's antennae twitched. "What do you propose, human?" Marcus smiled, the kind of smile that had preceded some of his most successful missions. They want to study adaptation. Let's show them adaptation they've never seen before. ZYX, you can communicate telepathically with everyone here. The crystalline being pulsed in affirmation. Yes, though some minds are harder to reach than others. Good. Karn, I'm guessing you can fight better than most here. The Mantis Panther's mandibles clicked in what might have been pride. I was champion of my world's warrior caste. Perfect. Here's what we're going to do. Over the next hour, the Vilaxians watched in fascination as something unprecedented unfolded in their arena. Instead of continuing the chaotic violence, order began to emerge. Through ZYX's telepathic coordination, Marcus organized the various beings into groups based on their abilities. Karn helped establish a hierarchy that prevented further fighting, while Marcus taught basic tactical formations that played to each species' strengths. When a new challenge was introduced, hostile automated drones released into the arena, the prisoners didn't scatter in panic. Instead, they worked together in coordinated groups. Flying creatures provided aerial reconnaissance, while stronger beings protected more vulnerable ones. ZYX's telepathic network allowed instant communication, and Karn's combat experience helped direct their defense. In the observation chamber, the Vilaxian's metallic skin shifted through patterns of confusion and interest. Unprecedented cooperation patterns detected, one noted. The human specimen appears to be catalyzing multi-species organizational behavior. Increased challenge parameters, another ordered. We must understand the limits of this adaptation. But as the challenges escalated, so did the prisoners' coordination. Marcus had turned their test into a training exercise, using each new threat to forge stronger bonds between the different species. By the time the Vilaxians ended the trial, what had started as a chaos of frightened prisoners had become something else entirely, the beginning of an army. As they were returned to their cells, Karn approached Marcus. You turned their violence into unity, the warrior said with respect. On my world, we would call that the highest form of combat wisdom. Marcus watched through the transparent walls as the Vilaxians analyzed their data. They think they're studying us, he said quietly. But they don't realize they're giving us exactly what we need, time to prepare, chances to cooperate, opportunities to learn their weaknesses. ZYX pulsed with understanding. You're not just trying to survive their tests. You're planning something bigger. Much bigger, Marcus confirmed, his eyes hard with determination. They wanted to study human adaptation. They're about to learn why you should never give a human a reason to adapt. As the lights dimmed in their cells, marking the end of the trial period, Marcus began to plan. The Vilaxians had created this crucible to study them, but they'd made a critical mistake. They'd given a special operations soldier exactly what he needed, resources, allies, and a reason to fight. The real test was just beginning, and this time, humanity would be writing the parameters. Over the next several testing cycles, Marcus learned that time in the Vilaxian station moved differently than on Earth. What felt like days might have been weeks or months. But he used every moment to strengthen the unlikely alliance he'd forged. Through ZYX's telepathic abilities, he learned the true nature of his fellow captives. The crystalline being came from a world of living minerals, where thoughts flowed like light through prisms. Their species had never developed technology because they had no need, their minds could reshape matter at will, though the Vilaxians' containment fields limited this ability. Karn's story was darker. The Mantis warriors' civilization had been studied by the Vilaxians before, leading to their eventual collapse. They did not just observe, Karn explained during one rest period, mandibles clicking with suppressed rage. They introduced challenges, scenarios that forced our warrior culture to become more extreme. By the time they left, we had destroyed ourselves. Other allies emerged. A gaseous entity called Mist, who could flow through the smallest openings and analyze chemical compositions. Twin beings of pure energy, trapped in containment fields, who called themselves the Spark Sisters. Each brought unique abilities, and more importantly, knowledge about the station's workings. The Vilaxians continued their tests, growing more ambitious with each cycle. They pitted their prisoners against environmental extremes, combat scenarios, and logic puzzles. But what they saw as research, Marcus treated as reconnaissance. There, he whispered to ZYX during one particularly grueling challenge involving extreme temperature shifts. See how the environmental controls pulse before each change. There's a pattern. The crystalline being's surface sparkled with understanding. The station's systems are predictable. A weakness? Everything's a weakness if you know how to use it, Marcus replied, a lesson learned through years of special operations. Keep watching. Keep learning. But the true breakthrough came during what the Vilaxians called a cognitive stress test. They isolated each prisoner in a virtual environment, forcing them to relive moments of failure and loss. For Marcus, they recreated missions gone wrong, teammates lost, choices that haunted him. The Vilaxians didn't realize their mistake. In trying to break him, they revealed how their neural interface technology worked. Marcus endured the psychological torture while studying the system's architecture, noting how it connected to the station's broader network. During the next rest cycle, he shared his findings through ZYX's telepathic link. Their whole station is one connected nervous system, he explained to the gathered allies. Environmental controls, security systems, even their own bodies, it's all networked. Karn's antennae twitched with interest. Like a hive mind? More like a massive computer network, Marcus corrected. And every network has vulnerabilities. Mist, what have you learned about their atmospheric processing? The gaseous beings swirled thoughtfully. Their bodies require specific molecular balances. The station constantly adjusts to maintain optimal conditions. The Spark sisters crackled with excitement. We could disrupt those systems, they spoke in unison. Create power fluctuations. And I, ZYX added, crystal facets gleaming, might be able to extend my consciousness through their neural interfaces, if properly connected. Marcus smiled grimly. Now you're thinking like a human. But we need more than just chaos. We need perfect timing, coordinated action, and... He paused as the station's lighting shifted, indicating another test was about to begin. But this time, something felt different. The Vilaxians who appeared at the observation panels seemed agitated, their metallic skin rippling with unusual patterns. Emergency protocol initiated, the announcement echoed through the chambers. Class 1 specimen incoming. All current testing suspended. The prisoners watched as a new containment cell materialized in the center of the arena. Inside was a creature that made even Karn step back, a massive, serpentine form that seemed to be made of living darkness, with eyes that glowed like dying stars. A void leviathan, ZYX's mental voice was tinged with awe and fear. They were supposed to be extinct. Their power, it could devour worlds. Marcus studied the creature, noting how even the Vilaxians kept their distance. Or it could be exactly what we need. Tell me everything you know about them. As his allies shared their knowledge, Marcus began to revise his plans. The Vilaxians had just introduced a wild card into their carefully controlled experiment. They didn't realize they'd given their prisoners not just a potential weapon, but a catalyst for everything that would follow. They think they're the ones doing the testing, Marcus thought, watching the void leviathan coil in its containment field. Time to show them what happens when the specimens decide to run their own experiment. ZYX pulsed with concern. What you're suggesting, the risk would be extreme. That's the thing about humans, Marcus replied, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of human determination. When the stakes are highest, when the odds are worst, that's when we're at our best. As the Vilaxians prepared their next set of tests, they remained unaware that their subjects had turned the entire station into their own training ground. Every challenge they presented was another piece of intelligence, every system they revealed was another weapon waiting to be used. The true test wasn't about survival anymore. It was about revolution. And humanity had written that textbook long ago. The station's alarms blared as the Void Leviathan underwent its first testing sequence. Marcus watched through the containment field as the massive creature phased between solid and ethereal states, its very presence causing ripples in what seemed like reality itself. But he wasn't focused on the spectacle, he was counting seconds between security rotations. The Vilaxians are distracted, ZYX communicated telepathically to their growing network of allies. Their resources are concentrated on containing the Leviathan. Perfect, Marcus replied through their mental link. Mist, begin Phase 1. The gaseous entity had spent cycles gradually dispersing microscopic particles of itself through the station's ventilation system. Now, those particles began gathering data about every chamber, every corridor, and most importantly, every weakness in the Vilaxian's supposedly perfect system. Through their shared neural connection, Marcus watched as a three-dimensional map of the station formed in their collective consciousness. The Vilaxians' obsession with studying other species had left them blind to how their own technology could be turned against them. Their neural network extends throughout the station, the Spark sisters reported, their energy forms pulsing with excitement. Every door, every containment field, every life support system, all connected. Karn's warrior instincts immediately grasped the implications. A single point of failure. Strike there, and the whole system becomes vulnerable, Marcus finished. But we need something big enough to overwhelm their safeguards. Something like. They all turned to look at the Void Leviathan, its dark mass swirling with barely contained power. The creature's eyes met Marcus's, and in that moment, he felt something unexpected, recognition. Intelligence. Purpose. It's not just powerful, ZYX realized, crystal structure vibrating with sudden understanding. It's aware. It's been waiting. Marcus nodded. They thought they were collecting specimens. Instead, they've been gathering an army. Each of us brought here for our unique abilities, our different ways of thinking. Even the Leviathan, they don't realize it's not just a force of destruction. It's a key. Through their mental link, Marcus shared his complete plan. It was audacious, borderline insane, but those were exactly the kinds of plans that humans excelled at pulling off. The kind that worked precisely because no one would expect anyone to be crazy enough to try them. The next testing cycle began as normal. The Vilaxians, confident in their superiority, initiated what they thought would be another controlled experiment. They never saw the real test coming. It started with Mist. The gaseous entity had discovered that the Vilaxians' metallic bodies required precise environmental conditions. A slight change in atmospheric composition wouldn't harm them, but it would interfere with their ability to maintain their complex neural connections. As the Vilaxians began to experience the first hints of confusion, the Spark sisters launched their part of the plan. Months of observation had taught them how to manipulate the station's energy grid. Small surges at first, nothing suspicious. Just enough to force the backup systems to activate. Their containment fields are drawing extra power, one Vilaxian noted, its metallic skin rippling with concern. Adjusting compensation protocols. That was exactly what Marcus had been waiting for. In engineering, there was a principle called cascading failure, when one small problem triggers another, and another, until the entire system collapses. The Vilaxians' mistake was creating a system so perfect, so interconnected, that it had forgotten how to handle imperfection. ZYX, you're up, Marcus commanded. The crystalline being had spent cycles analyzing the neural interface the Vilaxians used for their virtual testing. Now, it pushed its consciousness into that network, not to control it, but to introduce something the perfect system had never encountered, chaos. Random data surges. Conflicting commands. Feedback loops. The Vilaxians' neural network, designed for perfect order, began experiencing the digital equivalent of a fever dream. Security breach detected, the station's automated systems announced. Initiating quarantine protocols. But those protocols required power that the Spark sisters were already diverting. As backup systems activated, drawing more energy, containment fields across the station began to fluctuate. Including the one holding the Void Leviathan. The massive creature's eyes fixed on Marcus once more, and this time he felt not just intelligence, but appreciation. It had recognized the plan for what it was, not just an escape attempt, but a complete dismantling of the system that had imprisoned them all. As alarms blared and Vilaxians rushed to contain the cascading chaos, Marcus allowed himself a grim smile. The station's perfect order was dissolving into perfect chaos, and in that chaos, humanity's greatest strength would prove to be the Vilaxians' ultimate undoing. All specimens, prepare for final phase, he broadcast through ZYX's telepathic network. The real test begins now. The Void Leviathan's containment field flickered once, twice, and failed. The creature of living darkness unfurled to its full, reality-bending size, and Marcus felt its anticipation merge with their shared consciousness. The Vilaxians had wanted to study adaptation. They were about to learn its ultimate lesson: when you push too far, when you take too much, when you underestimate the will to be free, you create something far more dangerous than any weapon. You create revolution. The Void Leviathan's release triggered what Marcus had dubbed Operation Chaos Theory, the idea that small changes in a system could lead to massive, unpredictable results. As the creature's dark mass spread through the station's corridors, reality itself seemed to bend and warp in its wake. The Vilaxians' perfect order crumbled. Their neural network, overwhelmed by ZYX's random data inputs and the Leviathan's reality-distorting presence, began to fragment. Security protocols activated and deactivated randomly. Gravity shifted unpredictably. Environmental systems fluctuated wildly. "You do not comprehend what you have done," a Vilaxian commander's voice echoed through the station, its usual metallic calm replaced by something approaching fear. "This facility contains the most dangerous specimens in the known galaxy." Marcus replied through the station's communication system, which mist had infiltrated. "No, you didn't comprehend what you were doing. You collected beings from across the universe and gave them one thing in common: a reason to fight back. The revolution unfolded like a combat operation. Each former prisoner played their part with precision born from months of secret preparation. The Spark sisters overloaded power grids in systematic patterns, herding panicking Vilaxians into predetermined zones. Mist's particles interfered with their neural connections, making it impossible for them to coordinate a response. Karn led a group of warrior species in strategic strikes against key control centers. Their different combat styles, once studied by the Vilaxians as specimens of primitive aggression, now combined into something unprecedented, an interspecies special operations force. The Void Leviathan proved to be more than just a weapon of chaos. It moved with purpose, its darkness creating corridors of warped space that the rebels used to move freely through the station while the Vilaxians found themselves trapped by their own twisted reality. "They're retreating to the central control hub," ZYX reported through their mental link. "Attempting to initiate station-wide purge protocols." "Not going to happen," Marcus responded. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Execute final phase. Throughout the station, hundreds of specimens, once isolated and studied like lab rats, moved in coordinated waves. But they weren't attacking randomly. Every movement, every action was driving the Vilaxians toward a single point, the neural core that controlled the entire facility. The Vilaxians didn't realize their mistake until it was too late. In their panic, they had gathered exactly where Marcus wanted them, surrounded by their own technology, connected to their own network, dependent on their own perfect system. "You believe this is victory?" the Vilaxian commander demanded as Marcus and his core team breached the central hub. "You are primitives playing with forces beyond your comprehension." Marcus stepped forward, flanked by Karn and ZYX, with mist swirling around them and the Spark sisters crackling overhead. Through the massive viewing windows, they could see the Void Leviathan's darkness encircling the entire level. "That's humanity's secret," Marcus replied. We comprehend exactly enough to know that some forces shouldn't be controlled. They should be set free. At his signal, every member of their alliance acted simultaneously. The Spark Sisters surged into the power grid, overwhelming it with pure energy. Mist saturated the air with particles that disrupted the Vilaxians' neural connections. ZYX projected their combined consciousness into the station's network, while the Void Leviathan's power turned the very fabric of space against their captors. The Vilaxians' metallic forms began to lose cohesion as their perfect system turned against them. What are you?" their commander asked as its body started to dissolve into base components. "We're what happens when you push too far," Marcus answered. "We're what happens when you mistake imprisonment for improvement, when you confuse observation with understanding. We're the test you never saw coming." The station's automated voice echoed one final time, "Critical system failure. Neural network collapse imminent. Emergency protocols offline." As the Vilaxians' bodies broke down, returning to the raw metallic elements they had evolved from, their vast database of research began transmitting to every corner of the galaxy. Not as a record of their experiments, but as a warning: some species, especially humans, should never be underestimated. Hours later, Marcus stood in the station's command center, now repurposed as a gathering point for the freed specimens. Some chose to remain together, forming new alliances. Others prepared to return to their home worlds, carrying stories of how creatures from across the galaxy had united to overthrow their captors. "What will you do now?" ZYX asked, its crystalline surface reflecting the stars visible through the station's windows. Marcus looked out at the vast expanse of space, thinking of Earth, of home. "First, we make sure no one can ever use this station for experiments again. Then we show the galaxy that there's a better way. That different species can work together without forcing it, that strength comes from unity, not control." The Void Leviathan, now a permanent ally, created a window of bent space that showed Earth in the distance. Marcus smiled at the sight of his home planet, knowing that humanity's reputation in the galaxy had forever changed. The Vilaxians had wanted to study human adaptation; instead, they had become an example of what happened when you pushed humanity too far. As the freed specimens began their new journeys, a message spread across the galaxy: in their quest to understand other species, the Vilaxians had failed to understand one crucial truth: that the most dangerous force in the universe wasn't technology, or strength, or even the power to bend reality. It was the indomitable will to be free, and the human spirit that had united them all to achieve it.